All right, we are back on the record. The record will reflect the presence of all jurors, all counsel, and the defendant are present. Again, I was sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Carlos, but as I said, we had to take a break. And you can go ahead and continue.
Reset here, figure out where I was before. So Jane Doe 4's story is, the first call that she makes is incredibly important because she's got 15 years to think about what she's going to say. And she's got 15 years of just anger toward Mr. Winslow. And so, you know, she's going back and forth with Nikki, and this is it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a part of this thing. I'm going to make that call. So she makes the call, gets routed to Sergeant Emig, right? So Sergeant Emig says, what happens? She has a 20-minute phone conversation. Now, this is once again important to think about because Sergeant Emig said it was 20 minutes. Jane Doe 4 said it was 20 minutes. There's a lot to talk about in 20 minutes when you're taking a report of a sex crime. You heard on examination by the people, you know, Mr. Owens asked Jane Doe 4, oh, did they tell you not to be specific? Did they tell you that you were going to be interviewed later? You know, seriously, that's a joke. She calls sex crimes. They say, this is Sergeant Emig, sex crimes, what happened? And she tells her story. It's not about being specific. She gave specifics. She told Sergeant Emig exactly what she believed happened. What did she say? She said she was picked up by Kellen Winslow in his SUV. She said Winslow gave her alcohol in the car. Winslow gave her alcohol in the car. She blacked out, apparently while in the vehicle, and awoke groggy. What did she wake up to? Winslow's friends digitally penetrating and fondling her breasts. Okay, now, we know that Sergeant Emig wouldn't lie and make these things up. We know that Sergeant Emig has really no dog in this show. We know that his job is to take down reports. So this is what she told them, which is completely different from what she testified to at the preliminary hearing and again in trial. And the significance of it is, you know, this. It's like if there was only this story right here, that this is all we had, and you were to convict him based upon this story, then you would be 100% wrong. Because Nikki said this never, Jane Doe 4 said this never happened. But that's what she sold Sergeant Emig. And Sergeant Emig wrote it down. He wrote a report. Oh, by the way, she also, I should mention that she told Guillermo, her boyfriend, 6 months later, that this alleged assault with a person that she didn't name happened in a car. Not in a house, not in a place with stairs, in a car. So the version 2, she tells the investigators some 2 months later. She met Winslow at a party. She had 2 to 3 drinks. So this woman could be 2 drinks. Think about this. This woman, she's in high school. She knows how to drink. She normally drinks 2 or 3 beers. This is not anything new to her. She ended up at a house, and by the way, the drinks were not provided by Mr. Winslow. I asked her repeatedly, were you given anything by Mr. Winslow? No. Were you given anything by Matt? No. Were you given anything by anybody associated with Mr. Winslow? No. When you were at the house, were you given food? No. Were you given water? No. Nobody, and by the way, she took her own cup to the party, watched the beer being filled into her cup, which she drank. Nobody put anything in her drink at all. There's no opportunity for anybody to put anything in his drink, in her drink. She felt buzzed, but not drunk. That was her testimony. Felt buzzed, but not drunk, and then blacked out on the couch. I mean, that doesn't sound like something that happens very often. 2 to 3 drinks, you feel buzzed, and all of a sudden you pass out. That's it, no memory of it. She awakes to find Winslow penetrating from behind and then shoving her face into Matt's penis. She looked over to see 2 other people videotaping her. Right, so just look at these facts right here in comparison to what she initially told Sergeant Emig. They're entirely different, 100% different, other than Mr. Winslow being involved. Matt tells Kellen to stop. Kellen stops. Matt, one of the rapists, he helps her get her clothes on. Hey, are you okay? Do you feel like you've been raped? Hey, are you all right? He's the rapist, Matt. Matt picks her up and carries her downstairs. This is also important to remember. Carries her downstairs, into the car, white BMW, drives to her friend, Nikki, who's standing next to Chris. Matt picks her up out of the car, carries her over to Nikki, puts her in the car, and they drive away, right? That's a pretty significant fact, don't you think? Don't you think that if your friend is a victim of some gang rape, victim of some horrible event where you heard Jane Doe 4 talking about the fact that she was crying uncontrollably, don't you think you'd remember somebody carrying your best friend to your car? You know, and Nikki never did. She didn't remember any of that. What's the significance of the first call? Sergeant Emig wrote his report within an hour and 20 minutes. So it's fresh in his mind. There's no opportunity for him to be wrong about what she said. There's no opportunity to make things up. He wrote down what he heard. So the most important thing is not only does Jane Doe say that it was not true, she claims that she never said it. Okay? You gotta let that sink in. She's saying that what Sergeant Emig wrote down is not true. Okay? That's Sergeant Emig attributing to this phone call he got from her. And she's saying, not only is it not true, I didn't say it. Who are we going to believe on that? Because if we believe Jane Doe 4, that means that Sergeant Emig just made this whole thing up. Just decided to write a report which is entirely inaccurate based on statements that were never made to him. So how likely is that? It's not, because he has no reason to do that. Once again, he's a specialist. He's not just some guy at a desk. He is a specialist in sex crimes. And he's writing the report down. Jane Doe 4 tells us that not only is it not true, she never said it. So you have to reconcile that with her memory. You know, she's telling you things that happened in detail from 15 years ago, which are conveniently broken up by a blackout from 2 beers. That's the level of evidence. There's no other evidence here, ladies and gentlemen. There's zero. They're just her word. You know, and the things that her and Nikki talk about after, you know, Nikki doesn't even remember half of it. She says, well, I think I remember we should have said something back then. Said something about what? You heard Nikki's testimony. Finally, think about this. Ask yourself, why did they call Emig? I mean, he's part of the investigation. That was, you know, they spent 3 weeks talking about this, like, you know, fresh complaint about how they talked to the boyfriend, you know, right, 6 months after, and then 12 years later talked to the husband, you know, and then she talked to Nikki about it. They spent all that time talking about that, but they don't present the first law enforcement witness that she talked to. Why not? Why did we have to call them? Because it hurts their case. It hurts the credibility of Jane Doe 4. It shows that she is inaccurate in her recall of details, because once again, she said not only did she not say those, but those facts aren't true. So what are you to do with that? You know, you got a man's life at stake here. You've got somebody who's been accused of a crime, somebody is pointing a finger at you and saying, you did this, 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 and this, and they give different versions of what he allegedly did. And not only that, she's saying that it never happened. The version 1 that I gave you never happened. Sorry, no harm, no foul. Don't worry about it. That's why they didn't call him. That's why the prosecution didn't call him, because it hurts their case. And it shows the weakness in the case. Nikki testified that she remembered none of this. She doesn't remember, the most simple thing, your best friend being carried to your car by somebody, crying, You know, it's a traumatic event. She didn't remember that. No delivery of a crying Nikki to Matt, by Matt. No incident where she was with Chris meeting up with Matt to pick up Jane Doe. In fact, all of her testimony is consistent with Jane Doe's version of the first consensual encounter. Remember, Nikki remembered a 2-story house. So did Jane Doe 1 on the first encounter. Nikki remembered she drove to the house. Nikki remembered there were a handful of people at the house, including Matt. Nikki was on the couch, and this is the most important part. Nikki's on the couch when Jane Doe 4 comes down the stairs saying, "We need to go." She's upset. If you remember, Jane Doe 4 said on the first consensual encounter, she was involved with them. She voluntarily had sex with them. She voluntarily involved in foreplay with them. Matt came in, and they said, "Hey, can you watch?" She was not good with it. She said, "No, no, 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 that's not going to happen." Kellen stops. He doesn't rape her. He doesn't beat her. He says cake. In fact, he says, "Can I finish?" And she says, "No, no, no," and so he stops. Jane Doe 4 told you she came down the stairs and she said she felt stupid, she felt upset, and she said, "We gotta go." That's what Nikki remembers. Nikki doesn't remember anything about Jane Doe 4 being delivered to her, about Jane Doe 4 crying, about being in a car with her, after Matt delivered it to her, none of that. She remembers the first incident vividly, and that's what she testified to. So there wasn't 2 incidents, ladies and gentlemen, there's 1. There's a consensual act take place between 2 teenagers, a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. That is supported by Jane Doe 1's own testimony, by Nikki's testimony. Because we know Nikki was on the couch, we know that Jane Doe 4 came down the stairs, upset, telling her, "We gotta go. I am not cool with what they did." So nothing else supports this second event. There's no witnesses to it other than Jane Doe 4 and her memory. And how can we trust the accuracy of her details when she can call to make her initial report and give details that 1, she said she never gave, and 2, she said never happened? The important thing too, Nikki does not remember anything about any boys going upstairs, because there had to be more than just Matt and Kellen. There were other 2 people that were filming. So Nikki didn't know anything about boys going upstairs where her best friend was. And the only allegations that she talked about, that she described, were that Kellen was so big. Nothing about this gang rape that happened, nothing about being videotaped, none of that. She does remember that Nikki said that that was not okay, and she's referring to that consensual first act, and the only one. She remembered Jane Doe 4 being annoyed and angry. Those were her words, annoyed and angry. That is more consistent with being in a room with a 19-year-old Kellen Winslow and his stupid friend Matt, who comes in and thinks it's funny, than it is with a gang rape. And, am I missing something here? Applying the circumstantial evidence instruction, ladies and gentlemen, if 1 piece of circumstantial evidence is subject to 2 reasonable interpretations, and 1 points toward innocence and 1 points toward guilt, guess where this points? Toward innocence. They will jump up and down, and say it again when he gets up. 5 victims, 5 victims, 5 victims, 5 victims, 5 victims. Over and over and over again until you just forget about why you're here. They will call him a predator. They will call him a deviant until you forget why you're here. But this is why you're here. The facts and the ability to recollect the facts by witnesses who have a reason to skew them. I tell this to people all the time. We don't know what goes on in people's heads. Every day we drive down the freeway, right? There are people driving by us, next to us, coming toward us, in 2,000-pound steel death machines. We don't know who these people are. We don't know what they just did. We don't know what they're drinking. We don't know what their emotional state is, right? We just trust they follow the rules of the road. But the bottom line is, we don't know what goes on in people's mind. We don't know why they do what they do, and we don't know what their mental state is. We can try to guess. You know, we can look at them and say, well, you know, Jane Doe 1 just got some issues. You know, we can look at Jane Doe 4 and say, you know, you have to admit, at least you said something like this. But you won't, because she has adopted a memory. Whether it's true, that's why you're here. Regardless of whether it's true, she's adopted that memory. She will have that memory for the rest of her life. But whether it's true is something that you need to decide. And whether it's enough evidence to convict Mr. Winslow, it's only your decision. Nikki, Jane Doe 4 will always have that memory. But we know that that memory is faulty. Her blackout, you know, come on, 2 beers, 3 beers. Very, very, very unlikely, the smallest of people, especially in high school. She had experience with drinking. She even knew what her limit was. She tried to keep it at 3, because she was stayed in control at 3. No person gave her food, water, drugs, and she only remembers arriving at the house and the sexual encounter. That's it. So it's kind of like this convenient blackout, something that she may have adopted, something that, you know, it's really unexplainable that it's only that portion. You know, just a tiny portion of her blackout is just her being on the couch and then her getting upstairs. She also told you from the stand, I don't know if I blacked out. If I blacked it out, what she said. I don't know if I blacked it out. As in, I don't know whether I later blacked it out. Whether it actually happened or if I blacked it out. Those are her words. She also said, I don't know if I did something that might have escalated. Right? And she reacted to it now from the witness stand, but those were her words from the previous testimony. I don't know if it's anything I did that might have escalated it. So she doesn't really know what happened in general. We know that there was one incident that at least her friend Nikki can confirm. Nobody else can confirm any second incident. No one else can confirm this carrying of somebody individual to a car, or Matt, her rapist, helping. Nobody can confirm that. It's just Jane Doe 4's word. The only corroborating evidence is Nikki, who says all of her testimony corroborates the consensual activity that Jane Doe 4 testified to. Jane Doe 5, getting there. So you guys like numbers. Jane Doe 5, listen. She's a nice lady, right? Do I like cross-examining older ladies? No, I really don't. It's a difficult thing to do. And she fought with me, and she's feisty. I'll give you that. But like most people, like sometimes you stick to your guns. You think you saw something, and that's it. You know, somebody thinks they saw a UFO. Somebody thinks they see an alien. They'll stick to it. You know what I mean? That's their memory. But she didn't see anything. You know, she really didn't. If you listen to her testimony, she thinks she saw a lot of things, but she didn't see anything at all. She watched news reports about a football player accused of sex crimes. She told you from the witness stand that she didn't know that ahead of time. But we now know that's a little different. She clearly did. And Kellen Winslow, at the time, you've got a picture of Mr. Winslow at Crunch Fitness with an ankle monitor, right? Everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows who Kellen Winslow is, especially since that time he had been accused of a crime. So people knew exactly who he was. She says that she saw him touching his groin area and what she thought was an erect penis, right, on the exercise machine. All right, this is not a secluded area. This is not a hidden part of this health club. This is Crunch Fitness. You know, people come in at all hours. So Mr. Winslow decides, you know, on this particular day on a machine that he's going to stroke himself to the point of an erection in his sweats, I guess. You know, anybody can walk in at any time. She's moving to him, by the way. He's not moving to her. She's using the machines and gets right next to him, and then finally asks him to leave. Here's the important part, though. She said that the man walked downstairs to the main lobby with an erect penis. Right? Once again, how likely is that? How likely is it that the most recognizable guy at Crunch Fitness, the guy who's there a lot, working out, the guy who's on trial for rape and out on bond for rape, subject of attention because he's charged with rape, how likely is it that he's gonna walk down to that lobby? When you get back there, you can take a look at the exhibit. It's wide open. There's the front desk, right? Now, he's gonna walk down there with an erection, which Jane Doe 5 says conveniently he used his bag to cover it with. And I said, did you see that? Well, she goes, no, but he could have been using his bag to cover it. It's not very likely. This is, once again, doesn't fit any type of reasonable activity. I mean, you could get caught, you'd be seen. He's not making it down the stairs very far with an erection that somebody's not going to complain about it. The jacuzzi, once again, what did she see? Nothing. Zero. God, I don't care what prosecution gets back up here and says. She saw nothing because she told you, I don't want to look. She had in her mind, once again, this guy, the football player, the sick guy, now he's in the jacuzzi with me, I'm not looking. He's got this little towel around, she says a tiny towel around him that goes down above his knees, which is what everybody has at the health club because it goes down to the knees. And he gets into the jacuzzi. And this is where we get back to the circumstantial evidence instruction again, all right? So think about this. He sits down in the jacuzzi, in this jacuzzi, 5-6 person jacuzzi, he's sitting down. His arm makes contact with hers for like 1 second. That's what she said, 1 second, didn't hold on. So, that's circumstantial evidence right there. Is that a potential accidental contact, or is it a sexual contact? There's two reasonable interpretations for that, ladies and gentlemen. One is, hey, it was an accident. Two is, it's sexual in nature. But because it's reasonable if it was an accident, you have to adopt the one that points toward innocence. Likewise, the foot. Yeah, I mean, if you get into a health club, spa, and jacuzzi, and you make contact with somebody by accident, does that mean that you're trying to have sexual contact with them? No, it's an accident. Besides the fact, Mr. Winslow is a little large, takes up a lot of room. And even more telling than that, I think more telling than that, she couldn't see down the bubbles. This movement she talked about. What do people do in spa? What do you rub? You rub a muscle, you rub an arm, you put it against a jet. She described his shoulder moving like this. Not a hand going like this, a shoulder. But she's automatically thinking that he's masturbating. There's nothing, she can't see it. She told you she can't see in the water. There's nothing at all to say that he was masturbating, at all, zero. Just her assumption. Okay, last one of this one. He moves across to sit by the jets, and he says, ooh, this feels good. Right? You got one other person in the spa with you. You move to a jet and you put yourself against the jet and you say, ooh, this feels good. All right, circumstantial evidence, ladies and gentlemen. One points toward nefarious conduct, one points toward, hey, you know what? I'm sitting by a jet and it feels pretty good. You have to adopt, must, not can, not may, not I want to. You must adopt the one that points toward innocence because she didn't see anything. There wasn't anything there, and even worse than that, there was somebody else there. There was another man in the jacuzzi with Mr. Winslow in this exposed penis underneath the water masturbating himself. Do we have the complaint from that guy? Do you think that we might have heard something about it? Think about it. Did we? No. How likely is it? It's not. Remember, she testified here that she never knew Mr. Winslow was a football player, didn't know anything about him at all, right? So we, at the prosecution, brought on Officer Pacheco. Officer Pacheco, who did the initial report, who spoke to them. And what did she tell you? She said, Jane Doe's husband stated, he's the football player, the guy with the problem, he's a tight end. Jane Doe's husband said, I never said that. Why would Officer Pacheco lie about it? Why would she write it down? And she told you she puts them in quotes because that's what they said. The husband had seen him in the locker room before. Jane Doe admitted looking him up on the internet. That's what she told you. And the final thing she quoted was, this is a quote from Officer Pacheco, they brought it up to me. They knew who he was from the start. So how does that jive with the testimony? You know, it's a 79-year-old lady who thinks something happened to her, and her husband, who's in his 80s, who think something happened, and they're defending themselves. But the simple fact of the matter is what they told them before is they knew who this person was. I mean, he's on the TV. The people in the health club are talking about him. They know he's that guy, who's sick guy who's charged with these sex crimes. And then all of a sudden his wife thinks something happened to her. So the husband defends her. And then they're in the jacuzzi where nothing happens and every nefarious intention is attached to Mr. Winslow inside the jacuzzi. But at the end of the day, zero. There's zero. There's nothing. There's no witnesses that were there. The Crunch Fitness complaining about Mr. Winslow exposing his penis to them. There's no man saying, hey, you know what? Going down to the supervisors downstairs and saying, hey, look, this guy's, he's masturbating in the jacuzzi next to an old lady. No, they're not, because it didn't happen. It never happened. Jane Doe saw what she wanted to see. She saw what she wanted to see. And that's in her mind. It's embedded in her mind. Memories are as we get older too, they're a little harder to retain those memories. But we know that Officer Pacheco was there and wrote down the quotes and told you what she told them. All right. Those are the victims in the case, all the Jane Does. I explained to you, how they came about. How the Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2 run in the same circle. They know people on the streets. People talk. We saw that Jane Doe 1's daughter, clearly came here to support her, but also has a financial motive in this, which is kind of shows you exactly, that a lot of people could have financial motives. She's asking for $100,000 down to $50,000. We talked about Jane Doe 4 and how she might be, a little bit jaded about her memory. In fact, her memory is incorrect because we know that she told something completely different to Officer Emig. It's important that you remember that these cases need to be independently evaluated. Look, this is it. I'd love to stay up here for another hour. I mean, this is the thing we go through all the time. He gets one more shot, I don't. So I'm imploring somebody there who knows the way I'm thinking, so that when people say, well, there's like 5 together, I mean, where there's smoke, you can't have lightning 5 times. I want somebody to say, you know what? Every single case has to be done independently. That's what the law says. I need somebody to do that.
Overruled. You can cover it in rebuttal. Go ahead, Mr. Carlos.
You have to. You read the instruction I read to you at the beginning. Every single charge must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Pretty sure about that. Every single charge must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. You get that through your head. Every single charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Don't take strong parts of one case to fill in the gap for weak. That's not the right way to do it. You've got to apply the presumption of innocence, right? That's the important part, the presumption of innocence. And I go through this a lot, and it's cocktail party talk, presumption of innocence. Well, he's presumed innocent, so proven guilty, everybody knows that. But it's not until you have to apply it, When you have to apply it in a very, very difficult situation like we have here, today, that's when it really counts. When you have to apply it to somebody and have it mean something, that's when it really counts. So the issue then becomes, what breaks that presumption of innocence? It's the reasonable doubt standard. And I started this argument by telling you that, this is what makes America great is this. And our system of justice is what makes America great, because the burden of proof is a serious burden of proof. Mr. Owens accepts that burden. He'll tell you that it is a serious burden. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And the instruction tells you an abiding conviction to the truth of the charge. Abiding, right? And abiding means you can live with it. That's where the word root comes from. Abiding, abiding, abiding. Something that you can sit there a year from now or, 5 years from now, say that this was the right decision. I always tell people that like a trial is like you walk into a bar, right? And you sit down next to somebody and you start telling this story. Tell a story about how you sat on this jury, covered by TV all over the place, involved this football player. We listened to this evidence from these 5 people that came in, and they told these stories. And we came to this decision. And you tell, the facts of the case to this individual. And then they start asking you questions. They're saying, wait a minute. Wait. So, you get this right. The lady was on one side of the fence, and she jumped over the fence, and then jumped back over the fence, and followed into the car. And let's say like, wait. Are you saying that she told the police officer that an entirely different event happened, and then 2 months later told a different story and said that the first story never existed or she never said it? Or you saying this lady said that she saw him masturbating but then told you that she couldn't look under the water? Those types of things are what's called reasonable doubt, because you'd be sitting there telling that story and you can't explain them. I can tell you right now, because I've seen it in your eyes during this trial, that there are some things which are perplexing to you. Those are the doubts that have to be resolved before you can reach a conclusion in this case. There are plenty of doubts. These individual cases are like little boats, and these boats have holes in them, and they are in the water, and they are sinking. The prosecution wants you to fill those holes with the other cases. But there are some serious issues, and those are the issues that you need to deal with. Those are the issues that you need to be able to tell me or tell anybody that you sat on that jury, you've listened to the evidence, you came to this conclusion, it's the right conclusion. But, don't tell me that somebody sitting on the other side of a 5-foot fence with a naked man on the other side and not running away, but instead crawling over a fence to go to that person and then crawling back over the fence to be assaulted. Don't tell me that's not a reasonable doubt. Don't tell me that a woman who claims that she was choked and raped brutally, for 2 minutes she was choked, and doesn't leave a mark, and then volunteers to you that he did it in a way that wouldn't leave marks. Don't tell me that's not a reasonable doubt. Don't tell me that a woman who cannot identify a person in a lineup, can't identify a person in court on 2 different occasions, describes something completely different from the individual in front of you. An entirely different man with entirely different tattoos. Don't tell me that's not a reasonable doubt. Don't tell me a woman who 15 years later tells a story to an officer and then retracts the entire thing. And not only that, says, I never said it. Having to rely on her entire testimony to convict them. Don't tell me that's not a reasonable doubt. And finally, don't tell me that a woman who hasn't seen anything in the jacuzzi, hasn't seen an exposed penis, has never met this man before, but knows that he's been accused of some very serious crimes and overreacts. She tells you that there's some type of masturbation underwater, but you can't see it. Just don't tell me that's not a reasonable doubt. It's clear. Sometimes it's not a popular thing to do, but it's clear. Once again, you are the only ones that matter. You are the gatekeepers of justice, all of you, not us. We do what we do, but at the end of the day, it is you, 12 of you, who make that decision. All I ask, on behalf of Mr. Watkins, Ms. Barr, my client, and even Mr. Owens, and John Johnson, we appreciate the fact that you have taken the time, that you have listened to everything that we have had to say, that you've paid attention. It's been rough and, sometimes a little bit hard, but, we appreciate it. I am sure, I'm positive, that if you apply the law the right way, listen to what I've said, that you can come to the only reasonable conclusion, and that is that Kellen Winslow is not guilty of the charges that have been levied against him. There clearly is insufficient evidence to convince anybody beyond a reasonable doubt, unless you just say he is a deviant. Forget about it. 5 victims, deviant. Deviant. Forget about the law. Do the right things, ladies and gentlemen. I know that you will. I've been watching you, and I know it's going to be a difficult decision for you, but in the end, there's only one clear thing that you need to do in this case, and that's a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carlos.